My name is Patricia Kathleen, and this podcast series will contain interviews I conduct with women, female-identified, and non-binary individuals regarding their professional stories and personal narrative as it relates to their perspective. This podcast is designed to hold a space for all individuals to learn from their counterparts, regardless of age, status, or industry. We intend to transparently investigate the evolving global dialogue regarding underrepresented figures in all industries across the USA and abroad. By hosting these stories and conversations, we aim to contribute to the changing platform and representation of these individuals for the future. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome back. This is your host Patricia, and today I am sitting down with Cassie Owens. She is the owner and operator of Cassie Owens and Associate, which is a private therapy practice in Dunwoody, Georgia. Welcome, Cassie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to climb through your practice today. We were talking off the record, Cassie and I, and I really, what the niche populations that she services within her business, Cassie Owens and Associates, is a very near and dear to what we do with Patricia Kathleen podcast and a lot of our causes. I will read a quick bio on Cassie, but before I do that, let me offer everyone a roadmap for today's podcast so that you know in advance. It's following the same trajectory as all of the podcasts in this series. We will first look at Cassie's academic background and early professional life. Then we'll turn our attention towards unpacking Cassie Owens and Associates. We'll get into the logistics of who, what, when, where, why, how, and then we'll climb into some of the more philosophical ethos of behind the company and, like I said, the populations and areas that they specialize in. And then we'll turn our attention towards goals that Cassie may have for Cassie Owens and Associates and any other endeavor that she's working on for the next few years. We'll wrap everything up with advice that Cassie may have for those of you who are looking to get in touch with her or perhaps emulate some of what she's done with her business success. A quick bio on Cassie before I start onslaughting her with questions. Cassie Owens is the owner and operator of Cassie Owens and Associates, a private therapy practice in Dunwoody, Georgia. Cassie is a licensed professional counselor with a specialty and certification in maternal mental health and a focus on serving the needs of all women. With over 15 years of clinical experience working with individual clients, Cassie also supervises and oversees two other talented associate therapists in her practice. Collectively, they accommodate the needs of all women through a combination of impersonal, virtual, and walk and talk sessions. As an expert in maternal mental health, Cassie is experienced in training other clinicians, birth workers, and healthcare providers on the topic of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. Cassie is an advisor to the Georgia chapter of Postpartum Support International, PSI Georgia, and is committed to helping increase awareness and lessen the stigma of maternal mental health throughout Georgia. Cassie hopes that all women will have access to treatment when they need it most. So Cassie, I really do want to get into, I'm excited to kind of unearth your practice and explain it to people out there. But before we do that, can you paint us a brief picture of your academic background and early professional life following that?
Yeah, so back in the late 90s, I was at Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina, and graduated with a degree in psychology and minor in health science. So even at that time, I was interested in working with people. I knew that I wanted something in the helping profession. And while I was at Clemson, I was a student athlete tutor and mentor. So I was really able to help the athletes on an individual level, working with their study skills as well as helping them prepare for, in the classroom and on the field. So it was a very unique and awesome experience. After graduation, I moved back home to New Jersey and started a master's program in social work at Rutgers University, where I stayed for about a semester and realized that program, that just wasn't speaking to me. It was more about policy and social work rather than counseling and therapy. So I, in my early 20s, was like, okay, out of here, and moved back south to Atlanta because being that I went to Clemson, I had a lot of friends move from Clemson to Atlanta. So early 20s was just figuring it out, living on my own. And after some odd jobs in marketing, advertising, waiting tables at about 24. Even though that's still pretty young, I was like, okay, I'm ready to like move on with my career. And so that's when I started at Argosy in a master's of professional counseling. And that program was awesome. I learned a lot about counseling, therapy, skills, and it was exactly what I needed to be doing. And then after graduation, really for the first 5 years, was working as a therapist. I worked with children, so very different than what I do now. And my first job was at an advocacy center where a nonprofit organization, and they focused on working with children who had been abused. So it was a heavy work, but it was such a great experience. I had supervisors that were so very talented and very interested in developing me as a clinician by taking me to trainings and providing in-depth supervision. And I really feel like that was the start of me becoming a therapist. I did a lot of trauma work. I did a lot of working with anxiety, depression, because with trauma comes all of these other things. So I really feel like that laid the groundwork for me being interested in just therapy in general. Did that for a few years. And then, as you can imagine, like, that's heavy work. And I was like, okay, I need to do something else. Yeah. So I moved to a community mental health center. But unfortunately, because they knew my background, they wanted me to see all the trauma and abuse. So it was still a great experience. And those colleagues, even though that's been 14 years ago, I'm still really close with them because they were great mentors. I had some really great leaders. I still think it was a great experience. And then it was while I was working there that I gave birth to my first child in 2007 and realized that, okay, I might need a break from working with kids. At this time.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so stayed home with him for a little bit. And before his first birthday, I was pregnant with my daughter, my second child. And during that pregnancy, I decided I need to work. I really like my work. It's very valuable and important to me. So I started in private practice, and that was the first time where I really realized, okay, well, what do I do? What does that mean? I don't want to have a boss. I want to be able to write my own hours. I want to be able to do my own thing, but also do what I love and what I'm passionate about. So I was pregnant, but then just kind of started, making contacts and realizing that if I want to work with children, then how do I get those children to find me? And back then, as I had a baby, so I was going to the pediatrician, so I started talking to her, and that was very eye-opening. I'm like, oh, okay, you're a pediatrician, you work with a lot of moms, so let me tell you what I do. And that was my first kind of taste of, I got to talk about myself and what I do, and I have to be my own salesperson.
Right. Interesting, because nobody pictures that I think it's the last thing that someone going into any type of mental health field pictures is the marketing aspect if you do go out onto your own. I'm guessing, so for the first few positions that you were mentioning, particularly the ones that had the intensive trainings and the things that you got endeavored with, I'm assuming that those were social welfare, Medicare like scenarios where they were paid for by the state, or were they privately funded?
So the first one was privately funded. And so in that job, any reported case of abuse would go to child abuse, would go to the children's unit of the detectives, crimes against children's unit. They were in our same building. So we worked very closely with them. So that's kind of how that worked. And that was paid for. Our agency was nonprofit. There was a lot of grant work and things behind the scenes that I wasn't aware of. I was just, working as a therapist. Okay. So I was lucky to work with people of all different backgrounds. And then in community mental health, that was very much more like Medicaid type of clients.
Right, absolutely. And I know that there are a ton of different systems out there. In fact, I know enough to know that
Yeah.
I don't know enough about them. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the burnout rate, I mean, just to kind of loosely translate, when you briefly
Sure.
touch upon trauma and things like that, there's certain professions that have like a kind of general burnout rate where it's just the characteristics of the job are so mentally or physically taxing. Someone only lasts a
Yes.
certain amount of time. Is that true in the field that you were in particular, in dealing with the children?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because I looked back at some of these websites just to see who was working, and like nobody when I worked there is still there now, or that I recognized. And I think, trauma is it is taxing, and it's hard, to hear these stories, and my mind can only take so much.
Yeah.
So that's why I left that job. Um,
And as you
and then,
developed this, so I'm sorry, you were
no,
coming out, you were having your second child, you realized you wanted
yes,
to work and you needed to start marketing yourself. And
yes.
you were thinking that you still wanted to work with children. So how did you leap? How did you make that connection? Did you just start drawing out for everyone your own personal story as to what you were and who you were becoming as a therapist?
So I think I know. Are you asking me how I made the leap to private practice, or how I made the leap to what I'm doing right now? Because it's
How
almost
you
about the same time.
how you made the leap to private practice and
Okay.
or where you are right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. So I, I my son was like a year, and I was expecting. So I knew that the reality of me working in for a community mental health agency or some type of agency, working 40 hours a week, that wasn't going to happen for me, because working in community mental health, you don't make enough money to then pay for daycare for 2 children,
Mhm.
or you could, but you'd just be bringing home a very little amount. So and we were fortunate enough to not have to be in that position to worry about it. So I knew I wasn't going to work full time, and I always had envisioned from the first start that I would want to do some type of private practice. I just didn't know in my eyes what that would look like. So here I am, pregnant with a second baby, but I'm like, I got to work. I got to use my brain. So I was able to find office space close by my house, and I subletted an office for 1 or 2 days a week. I started going to pediatricians in my neighborhood and just kind of telling them who I am, what my experience is, you know, and
Nice.
and just kind of, old school door to
Yeah.
door
You
salesperson. Um, and I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, as a therapist in graduate school, you don't learn how to run a business.
right.
We don't learn that. We don't learn how do you market yourself? How do you tell people what you do? How do you get clients? Like, there's no course for that. There should be, but there's not. So it was kind of a slow process, and I was, I had 2 little kids, so I wasn't looking to work a ton, but I was getting referrals. So I was like, okay, this is working. This is good. And then 5 or 6 months into that, I had my second child. She came 5 weeks early. She was in the NICU for a while. And it was then that I experienced my own postpartum depression and anxiety after she was born. And that was something that was unfamiliar to me. I did not have a history of depression and anxiety. And I was kind of, like hit like a ton of bricks, and I
Hmm.
wasn't expecting it. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, what is this? Um, and it took me a while to figure out, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. I did go to my doctor. I did, ask for help. I did get on medication. But as you said, there weren't a lot of therapists. It wasn't really talked about back then as much as it is now, or I feel it
Yeah.
is now because it's my world.
Well, no, and I have to tell our audience, Cassie and I were talking prior to getting on the podcast and a little bit, and I was explaining that when I started my journey with parenthood, it was 2005, and people like Brooke Shields were just kind of breaking open the conversation
Yes.
about
Yeah.
postpartum and taking down some of that
Yes.
stigma
Yeah.
and really serving as a voice. And so, and I do feel like there is a wealth of information now. Even the royals are talking about some of their issues.
Yes.
we have this
Yes.
more open dialogue, but it wasn't very long ago, not like 12, 13 years ago, that you
Yeah.
couldn't even find too many books on it, you know, and certainly no one was talking about it between girlfriends and things of that nature. So it is interesting to see it like arrive as your, you know, as your career started to blossom. You are this
Yeah.
flagship, if you will, of this
Yeah.
kind of movement. I'm wondering now, I know that there are a lot of indexes, web indexes online for people who are seeking very niche, like specialized medical care. Do you know, because you started prior to that, when you were
Hmm.
still doing grassroots efforts, like, you know, knocking
Yes.
on people's doors,
Yes.
how, like, when was the advent of some of those indexes, and do you find them to be useful as they stand right now? And I'm not even sure what I'm referring to. I just know of a few out there, and some insurance companies do it now as well. But like, there's just there's certain sites that you can go to that have therapists in your location, what
Sure.
plans they take, like all those filters
Sure.
applied. When did those kind of come onto the scene?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say within the last, I don't know, maybe like, I'm trying to think. I So when I started hardcore, it was probably 2010, and it was not then. It was probably in the last maybe 5 years
Yeah.
ish, because so after my daughter's born and I'm going through my own, stuff, I remember the exact place I was sitting on my couch. And at the same time, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second. At the
Yeah.
same time, my husband and I were talking about my career, and we were talking about, if I continue to work with children, what is that going to look like? That's going to look like I'm going to see kids after they go to school, right? So most parents aren't going to take their children out of school for therapy appointments. They choose to make them after school hours. So that would mean my kids would go to school, come home, and then I would go to work.
Right.
And as my husband and I are talking through this, I kind of had a panic attack thinking like, okay, no, I want to be here when my kids come home from school. So that was a separate conversation, as I'm also experiencing some depression, anxiety. Then go to my couch where I'm sitting and I'm thinking, I feel so terrible. And I remember I said, I feel so terrible. You know what? But when I'm not here, this is exactly who I want to work with. And it was that moment that I knew, like, I want to work with me when I'm not feeling like me. And that's how everything kind of shifted gears and my focus changed, from that moment on. I was like, this is what I want to do. I
Hmm.
love working with women. Even when I was working with children, I was working with their parents, and I felt it was very easy to connect with women and adults. So it was that point on that I shifted focus and gears and started to think about, I'm going to work with women. This is what I'm going to do. And so that was back in, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so did you find that, I mean, you had to re-network again? I know that there's some cross-pollination, but
Yes.
going back in and speaking with everyone from midwives to, you know, communities of pregnant women, I mean, just that reaching back into a whole nother pool. It's interesting. It sounds a little exhausting. Had you collected skills in your first time around that you re-employed when you went back into this new kind of specialization?
Yeah, well, it's been interesting that you asked the prior question about the internet and where you can search for therapists, because at that time, I asked my brother-in-law's brother about search engine optimization. I said, okay, how can we make my website, how can people find my website? And so he did a search and he put all these terms in and he said, Cassie, nobody's searching for this. I mean, he gave me a number of like, I don't know, I'm going to make it up, like 1 million or 2 million, which I thought was a lot. And he's like, this is nothing. Nobody's searching for this. It would kind of be a waste of your money to pay me or a company to help you promote this.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was eye-opening. So I said, okay, well, back to door to door. And I really think as a therapist, it's nice when you can meet a doctor and you can have a face-to-face relationship with them, so they know when they're talking to their patients, oh, I met Cassie. Yeah, totally. You should go see her. If she can't help you, she knows someone who will,
Hmm.
because they've met me and they've seen my face. And I think as a therapist and trying to find someone to work with a patient, that's meaningful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's one of those areas that is wildly face to face or even virtually, you know. I'm wondering,
Yes.
so you kind of mentioned this like soft launch into this moonlighting, and then there was a quick
Yes.
switch of specialization and area of focus. When did you start just doing the gentle subletting soft launch of this space? Can you give us a year? Was it
So
2008?
I would, so 2008, 9, I was in one space. And then 2010, after I really decided I'm going to switch gears, I actually moved offices. And I would say between 2010 and 2012, I spent a lot of time refocusing, rebranding, relearning, went to a lot of trainings and conferences. I was introduced to Postpartum Support International, went to their 2-day conference. And it was there that I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. And I don't know if you're familiar with their organization, but their whole mission is to promote awareness, treatment, and prevention for mental health issues related to childbearing. And basically, so, women know that this is a thing, they're aware of it, and we can bridge the gap between women and providers so everyone can have access to help and support.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know?
And it feels like some of those schools were being developed as you were doing it. I mean, there are
Yes, yeah,
organizations that aren't that old, that deal with postpartum. Even people that hadn't really approached it directly, like the La Leche League back in the day. That was like one of the
yes,
main areas
yeah,
of female
yeah,
information. I'm talking about 2005 when I started family. And
yes,
even they didn't have a huge area of emphasis or specialization, and they were equipped to deal with it, and they did take like a survey, but it wasn't a huge topic. And I think now, I know that group in particular has a massive reference for dealing with postpartum depression, and just looking at different issues from baby blues too. And I noticed your site does this really beautifully too, because I think there are still a lot of terms that are muddied with people not necessarily defining their terms. And I like that you're on your website, you get into the difference, it was kind of the gentle differences between what are the baby blues and things that tend to dissipate naturally after 4 weeks, as opposed to things that can kind of carry on and become a little bit stronger. And I do want to climb into that. So you've established your
yeah,
niche, you're starting
yeah,
to go into some of these
yes,
organizations, you're penetrating those areas, and then you go
yes,
to build your particular
yes,
practice. There's still a ton of areas that you could kind of hit
practice.
on. There's a bunch of areas you could still choose to specialize in within the niche
Hmm.
that you're looking at. And I'm wondering how you kind of decided what areas you particularly would tackle, and then how you chose to bring on other associates and how they differentiate between you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I so started working with women. I knew that that's where I wanted to be. And in the earlier days, I had on my website like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. When I started getting more referrals from women who lived far away, like were coming to see me and they were driving an hour and a half, I realized, okay, wow, there's a real need here. Like there is a need to help more women who are experiencing depression, anxiety, postpartum. So then I met some colleagues here in Atlanta who do very similar work. There's only a few of us. And that was really nice to have people who are doing similar work. Okay, we have goals and visions. And I just think it was out of this great need. The more clients that were coming, I'm realizing, okay, I just need to keep doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of fast forward, it wasn't until 2017 when I was approached by my first intern who said, I want to intern with you. And I think at that time I had, 5 years of a lot of experience. I had a lot of relationships with OBGYNs who, you know, it was started with the grassroots effort, then maintained with visits, kind of like a farm rep, people who are selling drugs. I'll go into there and just like, hey, how you doing? This is what's new. This is what's going on. This is new research. This is what's going on in my practice. Sometimes I had groups. Other times um, you know, this is another thing that I did was I helped to found the Georgia chapter of PSI. So my name was out there, and then I started speaking for different organizations, doing some trainings, some advanced trainings. So 2017, Melissa approaches me and says, I want to talk to you about possibly doing an internship with you. And now in private practice, it's hard to guarantee someone X amount of hours that you have to get as a master's level intern. However, she also knew of Elizabeth O'Brien, a colleague of mine, and she said, what if I split time between both practices? And actually that was a fabulous idea, because not only can we give her those hours, Elizabeth and I are clinicians who do very similar work, but we have different styles. So she was able to learn from both of us. So that started 2017. She graduated in 2018. And then she started working for me and working from Elizabeth. You know, she had clients during her internship, and we just kept growing her as a clinician. And then spring of 2018, had another intern, you know, find us and say, you know, potential intern. And she said, I'm really interested in your practice. Sat down and talked with her. So we kind of did the same thing and splitting her time between myself and another practice. And things were busy and we were getting referrals. So then I was able to open a second office. I'm in a suite with 4 offices. And so I have 2 of them now. And so that was really exciting, just to have enough clients coming in the door that we needed more space.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was in 2018. Yes.
Having your talent approach you as well sounds kind of dreamy. You know, it's the whole, if you build it, they will come.
Totally dreamy.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, to be pitched by somebody, I think is awesome. A large part of like most young businesses growth is like hiring and hiring well. There's like day-long seminars about like hire well, fire fast, like all of these different things. And so to have this talent and find you out and approach you and take all of that out is awesome. So it sounds like your growth has been pretty exponential over the past 4 years. Do you foresee that continuing?
4 or 5 years.
Do you have so let's look at goals. I don't know if therapists do the same goals as like the rest of like business America was advised to, these 1 to 3 projections, but it is also a business. It's therapy and it's a business.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your goals look like for growth or maintaining or branding or any other changes like that for the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm in a suite of 4 offices. 1 just became available, so I'm planning on snagging that one, having another intern start in the fall. And I think that I would like to hire someone part-time who does a little bit of different, has a different skill set than I do. Because I think you mentioned what do my associates have. So both of my associates were my interns. What they brought to the table is one of my associates has a background in advertising and marketing, and she's really good at graphics. So if I need something fun or cool, she can design it and we can hand it out, because I cannot do any of that. It's like Word document. My other associate has a background in, she was in the corporate world for many, many years and works with high execs in corporate. So she can really speak to those women. She really understands kind of the stress that they're under in corporate America. So I think it's cool to have those 2 women in my practice who have the same specialty, but different backgrounds. So they bring a different level of experience. And so I hope to grow maybe just by adding another therapist or 2, widening our offerings in terms of maybe a little bit more couples and a little bit of trauma. But I really love the work that I do. So I know when some people talk about growth, they're thinking they want to do less clinical work and they want to oversee more. But I really like the one-on-one. I really enjoy it. I love, in this specialty, working in this field, the one thing that is awesome is that when women are coming in with postpartum depression or anxiety, they will get better. They will feel better. And I can say that to them with confidence. And it's not like it's me. I mean, part of it's me, but not all of it's me. It's just the nature of what it is. And I get to see that. And that's so rewarding, is to see them come in if their life was a puzzle, their pieces are everywhere. And then, week by week, it's like one puzzle piece is in, and it's coming together.
Yeah.
And they feel better. So I enjoy that work. So I'd like to maintain / grow a little bit, of course. I love to do teachings and trainings. I've done a lot of that over the last, I would say, like 4 years. Now that this is more of a thing in a field, I've done some advanced trainings for clinicians so they can really understand the ins and outs of maternal mental health. Because you can do the basic training, but then, okay, what is it like working with women in session? And really kind of diving into some anxiety, OCD pieces that you don't get at the general trainings, and how do you work with that, and what does that look like?
Yeah.
So I enjoy speaking on maternal mental health.
Yeah, and I think that it's voices like yours that have been there for 15 years that need to be the ones most spoken to and with. I'm wondering, with the advent of the current times, and in fact, just this morning, PBS NewsHour, I suppose it was released last night. I watch it in the morning. So, but there was a piece on pregnant women and a couple of postpartum individuals that were really like the levels of anxiety were raised due to COVID-19. And I'm wondering a couple of things, given that this is, a recent story that was just done in your field, but also I wonder if it will change. How many of your clients did you see virtually prior to COVID, if any? And do you think that some of them that have switched to this virtual therapy will stay on this format, thereby changing what your plans for new client acquisition look like?
I don't know. I wasn't really seeing any virtual clients. I always have that as an option. So like once in a while, someone would say, I can't get in. Can we do a video? Okay, fine. I like to see the clients in person, and they like coming in. Sometimes they like coming in because they're not bringing their baby and they need that break. Other times, it's good for them to bring in their baby because I can point out some things therapeutically as they're holding their baby or taking care of their baby that they don't see. So I prefer in person. It could mean that this is going to be more integrated into the practice, and I'm okay with that because I know that there are other platforms that only use video therapy. And my sister is a therapist, and she only does online therapy.
Yeah.
So
it opens it up,
we'll
I think,
and I think you're right,
reach to different people across the nation, and as more people tap into, I think it's nice to have that kind of international, if you will, even global reach for therapies. But I was curious about that. Do you think that with the next, with some of the anxiety, will we see a change in either techniques used to handle, some of the issues that postpartum or some of the other illnesses that you treat? Do you think we'll see a change with either the tools that we're using or these kind of piggybacking? There's in postpartum, there's anxiety, there's depression, there's all of these different elements, right? Like a puzzle piece. And I'm just wondering if there will be different things employed when you have something like a pandemic that requires everyone to socially isolate. Will there be I'm thinking, right now, in my head, what I'm thinking is someone creating a creative endeavor for more tools, like more psychological tools, due to the fact that we're in this very rare climate.
Yeah, I mean, I have been saying over and over again to clients, so much is unpredictable and so much we don't know. So it's hard to even, talking with a client who's about to give birth and not knowing what the hospital is going to be like because the rules are changing every day. The one thing that's consistent, you're asking about what's going to change, is that I just have to validate their emotions of being scared, worried, anxious, because this is such a weird time. It is weird. So it is okay to have all of those emotions. But I think it is going back to reminding people to focus on the things that they can control. And that could be like, okay, maybe I can't watch as much news if that's too much input. I can control the social media. I can control how kind I am to myself. So it's almost like going back to some of the basics is going to be most helpful, because with the pandemic and this crazy time, there's so much that's unpredictable and unknown. And that's what spikes the anxiety, because most people are anxious when they're uncertain or they don't know something. So this is adding fuel to a lot of people's fire. So really trying to dial everything down is helpful. And reminding them that being anxious, being worried, being scared during this time is normal, because this is a normal response for an abnormal time, and this is an abnormal time.
Absolutely.
It just is. Yeah.
I agree. And there is a certain amount, instead of, fighting it, I think of honoring that kind of fear that everyone has. There's a natural level of anxiety that if you deny it, it only exacerbates the situation.
Exactly.
So, I'm wondering if someone walked up to you, because you have this interesting career where you defined it and then kind of redefined it and respecialized it involved in this interpersonal dialogue where you sat down with yourself, your mate, you guys had this conversation. So you've had this really interesting growth, and now you've built this business that's flourishing by all measures. If someone walked up to you tomorrow, another woman or a female identified non-binary individual, and said, listen, I really love what you've done with your life. And I myself am just starting off on this journey. I think I'm going to go into a private practice eventually, but I'm not sure how to get there. What are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give that individual, knowing what you know now?
Number 1, I would say you can do it. And I say that because so many people in master's degree programs, professors will say, you can't do this. Don't try to go into private practice right away. You can't.
Huh.
I would say you can. I would say it is helpful to have a specialty or an interest that you're passionate about or can really empathize with. Oh gosh, what would be number 3? Number 3, you can do it, have a specialty, and I would say, oh my gosh.
Let me ask you this. What do you tell yourself to make yourself feel better when things feel a little bit overwhelming or a little chaotic in your business, in your day-to-day life? Like, do you have a mantra that you return to that kind of brings you a sense of peace and clarity?
I mean, it's funny when I said you can do it, because I have a bracelet that it has my information on it for when I run. And my little tagline is, you can do it. Like, you can do it.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think just really instilling confidence in someone that if they have a goal and they have a passion, that they can do it and I can help them. And I've had people come to me with that, how can I do this? How, and I think the marketing piece is the one piece a lot of therapists have problems with. Maybe they're not good at selling themselves. Maybe they don't feel comfortable walking into an office. So it's finding a way that they can use their skills and their strengths so people will know about them, because the whole thing is getting people to know what you do and that you're good at it.
Yeah. I love that part of your 3-pronged advice is telling anyone who approached you that you were able to help them. It's the first time I've ever asked that question, that you've included yourself in that scenario, in that individual's future. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I because I feel like, why not share that? I think it's really an important way to give back, is to say, like, I did this, you can do this, and I will tell you exactly what I've done so you can do that in your own way.
Absolutely. Anyone who hoards knowledge is draconian. So I've got, you can do it. It's helpful to have a specialty or a niche or a special interest. And the third one is your passion can and will drive your goal, and you're willing to help them, which is awesome. I love it. For everyone who needs to, would like to get involved or check you out online, can you list your website for us?
Sure. It is www.postpartumatlanta.com.
Perfect. And for anyone who's looking to contact Cassie or one of her associates, you can jump on the website. It has got a lot of information and actually a lot of other places to check. If you're looking for resources, she's got a tab for all of those pieces of information and just some really general terms and things like that that I found helpful. Cassie, I want to wrap everything up today by saying thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I know you're really busy, and I just appreciate during this time, especially for you taking the time to speak with me and let our audience glean some of your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's enjoyable. Yeah.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, we've been talking with Cassie Owens. She's the owner and operator of Cassie Owens and Associates. You can find her online. And until we speak again next time, remember to always bet on yourself.